This is Phantom Electric Ghost doing live on the air with Chris Behnke. For the first time, you're an entrepreneur and author, and we're going to talk to you today about all those things. And welcome to the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. Super excited to dig in and talk about all things that have to do with identity and just really connect. Super excited about it.
Well, thank you again for being on the show. We do have an initial URL for you that will be clickable. Is thehumannexus.com, and you don't have to write everything down. That will be clickable. All the URLs that we have up, and then we have another one that's an offer that you provided for the guest. The viewers of our show and the listeners. So we've got
Yeah.
this one, getting this profile advanced for free. And I'll put this up a couple of times. We'll talk about it more. I'll just have it up initially.
Yeah. Sounds
And
good.
uh, and then also just to let folks know that we are a featured podcast on the Newsly network. And if you use coupon code GHOST there, you can get 1 month free. We'll be on Newsly later tonight. We are a featured podcast there.
That's
So
awesome.
once we talk about those things, we got that out of the way. But one of the things that we're going to talk about today is unlocking your core motivators, the power of the Nexus profile.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, I always ask a question of all my guests is what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
That's a great question. So I feel like I've spent a lot of time as an entrepreneur, a lot of time in business. And when you do that, right, like you're forced to work with all kinds of different people. And about 15 years ago, we started to develop in one of our companies some business tools that help people with team optimization, help people with leadership, conflict resolution, and hiring. And what was amazing is as we began developing that, my wife and I just discovered that it also was really helpful in our own communication inside of our own relationship. And then we found out it was really helpful with our friends and family and parenting our children. And it's kind of obvious now, but at the time it wasn't quite so obvious. But really, what we discovered is that um, if you can learn how you're wired, what your motivational drivers are, and then in turn you can learn how other people are wired and what their motivational drivers are, and you can learn how to honor yourself and honor them in the way you communicate, the way you handle conflict, the way you handle difficult things. It's super powerful, and it actually can create an environment where you really can thrive in kind of every area, whether it's your own personal relationships, your business, whatever. You can actually begin to really thrive because pretty much everything I've found that matters, that's important, involves working with other people. And so the more you can discover how to interact with them well, the more you can thrive in those different areas. So we just developed the Nexus profile, which is the link there to the Nexus profile, and a series of e-courses, a series of workshops that over the last 10 or 15 years we've found just really have turned business around, saved marriages, just really help people thrive in different areas. And I'm super pumped to just be on this journey discovering that stuff, but being able to really help people in those different areas. That, I think, is as succinct of an answer as I can give to that question.
That's interesting because I was reading one of your points that you believe everyone's made for a purpose, and we can talk deeper about that.
Yeah.
Being a producer and a music aficionado, what I do when I meet somebody I work with is I'm trying to pull that out of them. Right? I understand. I'm trying to get them to realize
Yeah.
how good they are, and
Yeah.
to kind of build them up and allow them to show their vulnerability, and
Right.
allow them to show me who they are, and start to have them trust me. And it's
Yeah.
the relationship of trying to pull the best out of everybody. I think every
Yeah.
manager wants to do that, and the producer is just another type of manager. So
Yeah.
the communication you have with people, whether in a sports team or a band, everybody's on a team.
Yeah.
And how do you
100%.
get those team dynamics to work and figure out how you get people to not pull against each other, but to kind of pull together?
Totally. Yeah, totally. And I think that it's just like the golden rule. Okay. So like the golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And that kind of the normal thinking of that is, I like people to be kind to me, so I should be kind to other people. And with something like kindness, it works pretty well because that's pretty much universal. But really, everybody's very different. So it actually breaks down without a better understanding of what that really means. Here's an example. So if I wanted to do something amazing for my wife and really honor her and just really spoil her and just love her and celebrate something, maybe I want to take her to a really fancy dinner. So if I want to treat her the way I want to be treated, maybe I'd go pick the very best sushi restaurant in my hometown, and I'd go meet with the chef, and I'd like have them prepare something special, just this amazing, amazing dish. And the problem with that is that she doesn't like sushi. I like sushi. So if I'm treating her the way I want to be treated, that would be go to the nicest sushi place in town. But she doesn't like that. So it's actually dishonoring to her to try and honor her the way that I would want to be honored. The better understanding is really treat them the way they would want to be honored. If we both like to be treated with kindness, because most people do, that's kind of universal. But the way we think, the way we operate, our motivational drivers is how we describe it. They're very different. And if we can learn that about ourselves and learn to honor ourselves and learn that about the people around us and learn to honor them through communication, it's super powerful. Just incredible breakthroughs can happen.
Well, it sounds like it's like a basic thing. I'm in software design, and we have to do these sessions called, joint application development sessions. Everything's kind of agile. And the idea is like you got to have good listening skills. So like you go to the client and you're trying to figure out what they want. But you can't really step on them while they're trying to tell you what they want, right? So you need to have really good listening and actually not be thinking about your response, but actually what they're actually telling you, their business problem is.
Totally.
And then later, after you digest it, start to kind of dive in on it. But you really got to hear, because I've heard a lot of times when somebody will like interrupt in the middle of them trying to explain what they do and try to act like they know it already.
Right.
Don't actually hear it. Like you said, like if you made the assumption your wife wants to go to sushi restaurant. And you make the assumption that all loans are done the same way. We're like, well, maybe not.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, that's so spot on. That is so spot on. So like, for example, you think about two people. Let's say one's named Susan, one's named Ed. Okay. Let's say Susan is a really, so you don't have to understand NEXUS for this to make sense, but in the NEXUS, let's say Susan's a driver. That means Susan's motivated by progress. She's motivated by forward movement. She's more motivated by things happening, stuff coming together, forward progress. Things are being accomplished. That's what Susan's motivated by. Let's say Ed is motivated by relationships and unity and making sure everyone is like cared for each other and taken care of, and they feel good, and they're like, he's motivated by the unity of the people. We call that influencer with the NEXUS profile. So if I say to Susan and Ed, hey, I need you guys to go do a research project on insurance. Neither one of them like that. Neither one of them want to do research on insurance. Susie doesn't, Ed doesn't, no one wants that. But if I say, hey, I know you don't like it, do it anyway. That's not super honoring. If they work for me, that maybe they'll do it. Maybe they won't love it. Maybe they'll do a bad job. I don't know. Maybe they'll do an amazing job. Doesn't matter, but it's not honoring. But if I say to Susie, hey, look, Susie, I know that insurance research isn't like your top thing that you like, but here's the thing. Do you remember last quarter when we had a massive project and we didn't have the right insurance and something went wrong and it stopped the whole project and the entire project came to a halt? We weren't able to move forward and we actually lost $750,000 on that project, and it just, the whole thing stopped. Do you remember that? So can you go do research on getting the right insurance in place so that there's nothing that will stop this project from moving forward? Then Susie is going to go, man, I love that. I don't really like insurance and doing research for it, but I do want to make sure the project doesn't get held up like last time. Now she's related in a way that's honoring to her to doing that. And then if I go over to Ed and I say, hey, Ed, I want you remember how last 6 months we had that project, and because we didn't have the right insurance, it all got held up. And the team was let down and people were frustrated. And we actually had to lay off, 7 people, and then they weren't able to have a good Christmas with their family. Remember that? Can you go do research on the right insurance so that nothing happens, so that the vision of the team and everybody is able to keep working, and the success that everyone's worked so hard for, everybody can realize their part and things can move forward? Now, Ed's motivated to go find the insurance, not because of forward progress, but because of the team. And Susie's motivated to go do research on the insurance, not because of the team, but because she wants to make sure the project moves forward. This is like the same task, and neither one of them really like it, but we're reframing it in a way that relates to them according to their design, according to how they're wired. Now we're honoring them. Now we're taking them to the steak restaurant, not the sushi restaurant, if you know what I'm saying. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense because, like, a lot of times people, are wired differently, as you said. And if you learn how to kind of, figure out to get skin in the game, like, so they want to do it.
Yeah.
It's like the idea a lot of times is like, you think about like education,
right?
Like you think about like a calculus and algebra and physics. Like most kids back in the 70s, they're like, what the heck am I going to do with this?
Right.
But now with the video games, but video games today, now a lot of teachers will say, that physics when you're playing your video game and the character responds to when you hit them or when you blow something up the axis, or if you can show them that these physics calculations and calculus calculations and the geometry, it relates to this, and after you like your PS5, you like your Xbox. So if you get those kids to see how that physics works and that kind of thing, they'll want to do it. That's how I got into programming, because I started looking at asteroids and Defender and like, how does that work? Back in the 70s, and I figured out, you have to understand physics, you have to understand algebra, you have to understand geometry. And when you can see how it works within a program, it wasn't esoteric. It's like, if I do this, then this happens.
So it became real. It became tangible for you.
Yeah, if you can get somebody to take an idea like that and make it real for them so that they actually want to do it and they understand it. And sometimes people don't do the extra work that you're describing to get somebody to be motivated or to key in on who they are.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's a super good example. It's kind of like the physics aren't important till you relate it to the reality of like, hey, everything that's happening inside of this environment that you care about. So like in a video game, physics is related to everything. The way this character moves, the way this thing happens, the way that happens, the way that when this does this, all of that stuff, that's related to physics. Suddenly that math, area of mathematics becomes alive because it's related to something that they care about. And that's exactly when we talk about with the NEXUS profile and that kind of stuff, we talk about, that's like a really great example that you gave, because it's tying to the way someone's wired, just in the way you're saying, hey, I'm tying this area of mathematical study to something you care about. I'm tying this language to a way that relates to the way you're wired. It's like I'm speaking the same language. If I speak French and you speak English and you don't know any French and I don't know any English, we're going to have a real hard time communicating without some kind of a bridge. Now we could throw a Google Translate there, but that's not like smooth as if we speak the same language. So this is about a way to like unlock the same language.
Yeah, it's like I worked in Japan, and another example. And I didn't know Japanese. I had translators, I had interpreters, but we decided to use this agile methodology that used flowcharts, right? So with activity diagrams, and logic is logic, whether you speak Japanese, German, or English, or whatever. So the idea of flow is logical. It's kind of mathematical. And that what we did, instead of creating these 100-page documents, we did these activity diagrams that we could show process flow. The Japanese engineers could understand that way faster than translating the document. And so when we started talking in flowcharts and activity diagrams, they totally bought in. And we had a big problem with translating documents to Japanese and English to Japanese and Japanese to English.
Right.
But once we had these flows, it was all graphical. And it was something that didn't matter. We had people from multiple languages, German, people speaking Chinese, we were in the Japanese environment. So that was a really good idea to zone in on something that we all could understand.
Yeah, universal, something universal.
Yeah. And that's a hard thing sometimes to figure out, like, what is that? Because everybody wants, well, English should be universal. Like, maybe it's not.
Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. That's super good. Yeah, that's
Yes.
awesome.
So maybe you can talk more about like the 80-20 rule and how you can flip it. And because maybe that's a concept I was reading about. I'm kind of interested in
Yeah.
approach.
So 80-20, people call it 80-20. It's, it's really, it all came down from an Italian economist. Pareto was his last name. Vilfredo Pareto, I believe, is his first name. But basically, what he discovered was that what he originally tipped him off was that 20% of the Italians that he interacted with owned 80% of the property. He was also kind of a hobbyist gardener, and he recognized that 20% of the pea pods in his garden produced 80% of the peas. And then he realized that that was true with every single vegetable he grew, with every single flower, is that there was this ratio of 80-20. And then he began to recognize that it was actually available in every single aspect of life. So it's written about a lot, 80-20. People talk about it a lot. There's lots of business books on it, but it's actually a concept that just kind of universally is true in every area of life. It's kind of like 20% of your friends produce 80% of the happiness, and 20% of your friends produce 80% of the trouble, too. 20% of the salespeople in any organization produce 80% of the sales. So it's kind of like this universal truth that's true. But the thing is that you can actively change it, right? It's just kind of true when things play out for the most part. I mean, it's not always true, but it's pretty much universally true in every area of life when things just kind of play out. But you can actively and purposefully shift that. So in business, for example, I help businesses, and what I found is I'll go into a business and I'll say, hey, 80-20 rule, what we're going to do is we're going to flip that around. And they'll say, well, what do you mean by that? Oh, well, what we found is that like for sales, for example, it's the easiest example. 20% of your salespeople are producing 80% of the sales. And every time when you talk to the leader, they're like, oh, I totally get what you're saying. I know all about that. That's not really true here. Like, we're way better than that. But what I find is that it's still true there. So let's say I have 10 salespeople, 2 of them are producing 80% of the sales. So one of the things that we do to flip the 80-20 is we actually go in and we have a process where we work with the leader of the company. We have everyone take the NEXUS profile, and we work through a consultation process to dissect and understand through this consultative process what the profile makeup is of the 20% that's successful, the 20% that performs the best, the success matrix that makes up the 20% that are doing 80% of the work. And then we go to hire new people. We run through this profile. Everyone takes the NEXUS profile, and then we only have them interview the people that are wired to succeed, like the 20% that are already doing amazing. So if you think about it like this, if you've got 10 salespeople, and let's say they sell $1,000 worth of stuff, it means that those 2 sold $800, and all the other 8 only sold $200. So if you just eliminate the 8, maybe you let them go, maybe you fire them, maybe you give them different jobs, I don't know, but you eliminate the 8, so the 2 are still producing $800. But if you if you find just 2 more like the 2, you now only have 4 employees. So you're actually short 6 employees, but you're actually selling $1,600. So you're actually $600 ahead with 6 less employees. So
more productivity.
This is what we mean by flipping the 80-20. So here's another example. We're probably going to start working with this company that services and helps and supports special needs adults. So it's one of the positions that they have is like this care person. So this is an in-home care person. So a super hard job. Like you're helping these adults with special needs, and sometimes they get like kind of crazy and they need different things. It's really hard job. So the turnover in the industry on this job is 50% after 6 months. So half of the people you hire quit after 6 months, but you have to do all this training. So what you find is that it's not 80-20, it's more like 95-5 in that job, partially because it's such a hard job. But what you find is that for 100 people like that, 5 of them actually love the job. They thrive. They love it. They come to work and they're like, this is the most meaningful job. I'm changing people's lives. I know it's hard, but I love it because look at all the good that I'm able to, like, they're wired to do that job amazing. So what's interesting is the 95, they just, maybe they thought they were going to like it. A lot of times they just needed a job, but they don't thrive and they can't handle it because the job's super hard. So they quit after 6 months. So if we can go in there, create a profile that actually identifies what is different, what is the design, what's the NEXUS profile design of the person, that's that 5% that actually love it. And then we only hire people that are like that. If we can lower that 50% turnover rate to 40%, which I believe we'll be able to get it down to 10 or 15%. But if we could just go from 50 to 40, this saves, the industry millions of dollars. And it's not just the money, right? Like the people, the client, the patient, they have a better experience because the people that are helping them actually are thriving in the job. The job people, the employees have a better experience. Their life is better because of it. The company itself saves a ton of money because they're not retraining people, and all the people that work for the job that you don't hire and put in there, they're actually, their life's better as well because they're not spending 6 months realizing they hate this job and then have to go find a new one. So literally everybody benefits massively by getting the right people in the right job. And the way that you do that is the only way you can really do that is to understand how people are wired at their core and understand how that fits into that particular job function. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Do you get a lot of buy-in to your approach? Is it something that the corporate leaders are familiar with or not familiar with?
So the bigger companies all have HR departments that already have solutions in place that they think are great. The problem is those solutions, for the most part, I mean, sometimes they're helpful, but for the most part, they haven't solved the problem because the problem of 80-20 still exists. So if their solutions were amazing, it wouldn't be 80-20. It'd be 50-50. It'd be, 80-20 the other way, where 80% are performing high. So like the problem still exists. So it's the solutions that exist out there, they're not amazing. So companies where we are able to implement it and they actually buy in and they really only interview the people that are designed for it, we have tremendous success. The trouble is it is hard to get into that process. What happens a lot of times is you say, hey, I know we have 1,000 people applied for this job, but you're only going to interview these 14. And they're like, well, but we really want to see those other resumes. What if they're good? Well, they're not good because they're not the right profile. So we do have difficulty sometimes getting companies to really trust it because they usually have developed something over a long period of time that they believe in. Problem is they wouldn't need our help if their systems were working. With smaller companies, it's usually a little bit easier because they don't have big HR departments that already have a process in place. We can come in and help them create a profile, help them pick the right person. And then, I mean, it can be a massive, massive benefit to the bottom line of the company in a very short amount of time if they get the right people. So Jim Collins wrote this book called Good to Great. It's one of the most famous business books that ever has been written. In that book, he says, getting the right people on the bus is one of the most important things that you can do to make your business successful. And I believe that that's mostly true, but I believe it's one step further, which is you got to get the right person in the bus and you got to get them in the right seat. Because sometimes we find that somebody gets into a position through the Peter principle. That's where you just keep getting promoted till you suck. If you're amazing, you get promoted. You're amazing, you get promoted. You just keep getting promoted until you're no longer amazing. They call it the Peter principle. And honestly, that's how most people get into the management position that they're in, which is a ridiculously bad if you think about it. So basically, we just keep promoting people till they're not good at their job. But if we can get them in the right seat where they do thrive, which doesn't always look like a promotion, but sometimes we just shouldn't promote them. We should just promote their salary because they're in their sweet spot. So we can get people in their sweet spot. We can flip the 80-20 in every single company, in every single department.
A lot of times, people they get into an organization and, like you said, they might be a very creative person and they're in the wrong position. So they get turned off and then they leave because they're not designed to be in the box, right? They have a lot of out of the box thinking. They probably should be doing a lot of the kind of what if stuff, like what if this, what if that, and they should be kind of in that, and they're being told to do this kind of industrial, just on an assembly line.
Totally.
So if they're in the assembly line mode, and when they're really a creative thinker, like you think about the bell curve, they're on the edge of the bell curve.
Yeah.
But you're trying to measure them in the middle, and it's like that's not who they are. I mean, Einstein got D's.
Totally.
So when you use that tool to measure him, it wasn't actually measuring him correctly.
100%. So you said you're in software. You said you're in software development, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're in software development. So what kind of software development do you do?
Well, we do big software for administrative systems for banks and insurance companies.
Okay.
They handle like millions of policies or hundreds of millions of policies that we have to deal with big data.
So you have so in that stack, you probably have software developers that are doing like almost all database work. You've got DBA, database administrators. You probably have some UI guys, right? Because there's probably a front end.
Yeah, we have UI guys.
You got some UI guys. You and I both know that the type of person that's going to make an incredible user interface is a really different kind of person that's going to go in and figure out how to optimize some specific table in the database in a way that will return a much faster result with a giant query, right? Like it's a different kind of person, way different kind of person. But if you don't know that, right? If you don't know that and you're like the HR department and you're just hiring a software person or a technical person, you're gonna likely put the wrong person in the wrong role. And the thing is, especially early on in people's career, they might not even know. Like they might have, gone to get their computer science degree or whatever. They somehow got into it and they're like, oh, I love this. And they're doing some kind of, they're doing some kind of web front end development. And then they get a job at your company where you're talking about, and then they get thrown into this like tedious, algorithm optimization task, and it's just going to be horrible for them, right? Like, so it takes a different kind of person. So to be able to identify, hey, who is the statistician? Who's the amazing DBA? Who's the guy we're just going to let this guy refactor everything. He's the refactor guy. He's going to go in, he's going to optimize everything. Well, this other super creative person, we got to have him or her work on the UI design. You put the person that's amazing at refactoring in UI, you put the UI person that's amazing at UI to refactor everyone's code, like it's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah, so that's what happens. We get nightmares.
You get nightmares. And you've got the guy that should be designing UI. He never documents his code. Like I could just read the book for you based on all the work that we've done with the NEXUS profile. But think about it like this. If you could say, hey, we're going to take the very best DBAs. We're going to take the very best statisticians. We're going to take the very best UI designers. We're going to take the guys that are just incredible at finding the bugs and not getting overwhelmed by someone's messy code, right? We're going to take them. We're going to find the 20%. We're going to identify what makes them unique. And then we're going to look for other people. I'm not even talking about hiring. We're going to look for other people in the organization that are doing a different job and say, hey, we want you for the next 8 weeks to go try this role. Sit in here, try this role. Let's do paired programming because you say you're doing agile, right? So let's do some paired programming. Let's get these two guys together. Try this out. Well, I don't know. I never thought about that. Well, you're wired to do it amazing. So let's try it. What we find is that almost always they will absolutely thrive. And software is one of those things where there's all these little things which change, by the way, in different companies. So like what's needed in your company for database management is so different than what's needed for some other company who's managing a WordPress database or something. Like it couldn't be more different, right? So if we can help a lot of times identify how to get the right people according to how they're wired, what they're going to thrive at, doing the right thing, probably save you guys a lot of bugs and a lot of frustration. Probably a lot of arguments and meetings.
Yeah. I mean, in my point in my career, I got into consulting because I got really good at doing things, and then I can go from one project to the next, from one company to
Yeah.
the next, kind of focusing on what my skill core set, and then I get to learn how different companies work. So I've been
Right.
bouncing around all the major insurance companies and tons of banks, and I've seen parallels and similarities,
Yeah.
and then there are big differences on between how some of these guys work. And
Yeah.
because I wasn't in the same place, I'm able to see those differences and offer
Right.
consulting kind of services like the way you do
Yeah.
as a consultant. Because some people have been in that one position for like 30 years.
Right.
I've kind of bounced around for the last 15 years,
Yeah.
but learning a lot and relearning things and actually moving forward. And a lot of times the people are kind of scared to do that, to kind of take that and then put themselves out there. It's
Yeah.
a different kind of mindset.
Yeah, that's so good. I think we're learning, I think we're learning. I think one of the problems that's out there is there's a lot of personality assessments. There's a lot of people using, they're trying to use clinical tools like Myers-Briggs, and there's just some things out there. And the problem with a lot of that stuff is they're not identifying, they're not quantifying the unchanging parts, like the way people are wired. They're quantifying more often like personalities or behavior. And so the problem with that is that sometimes you can get somebody where hey, I think you're going to thrive here, and it seems like they will, and they do for a short amount of time, but eventually like it begins to be difficult for them, and motivation becomes a problem, and they end up developing resentment towards the job and stuff. This is what we've seen, because deep inside they're really not wired to do that, but they've learned that that's what they're supposed to do. So for a period of time it seems well, but if you can figure out, and this is what we do with the Nexus, is if you can figure out how someone's wired, how they're designed, like the way that they think, they're motivational drivers, right? Like I talked about with Susie and Ed, I think are the names that I used. I think Susie was the driver and Ed was the influencer. If you can say, hey, I'm going to relate and communicate and honor this person through communication and management and role, and I'm going to stick Susie in the right role that honors how she's wired. I'm going to stick Ed in the right role that honors how he's wired. Man, you can have radical breakthroughs in organizations. And you don't have to be like the boss or the owner to have a radical breakthrough, because even with your coworkers, if you can begin to understand yourself better and then figure out how to honor them, you can have a pretty radical breakthrough just in the way you collaborate with people. And like you were saying, you do agile development, and did you say you're doing like paired programming where you get a couple people working on a problem together? You guys do that?
Yeah, well, we do multiple type of styles, where we do pair people together.
Yeah.
But we work with a global team, so we have got people
Okay.
in different time zones, different places, and
Got
we
it.
have tools where we can work online together with people in different
Yeah.
countries
Super
and
cool.
work on I was just on a session with 2 programmers
Right.
and a BA and a manager, and we're in
Okay.
real time testing code, and we're
Got it.
actually seeing. I'm looking at the UI, running through an algorithm, and somebody's in the back end checking the code and seeing exactly
Right.
what's going on. We're
Yeah.
having this in real time.
Yeah.
We're actually able to see on multiple screens what is actually happening. And
Yeah. So imagine
we have,
if you have
yeah,
your whole team, and the whole team, let's say there's 100 people on this team, big team, and everybody has a Nexus understanding. They've all taken the assessment, and you're like, okay, we're going to go test this part of the code. We're going to test this part of the UI. So we're going to hop in there. Let's get these 3 people, because they're going to be amazing at finding any bugs. They're going to be able to see the subtle things that need to be adjusted in the code. They don't need it all to be documented. They're going to be able to go in there. Let's get these 2 people to look at the UI and test it real time because of how they're wired. And you start identifying the right people and putting them into the right roles based on how they're wired. What we've seen is pretty radical breakthrough. Now, sometimes people can kind of get close to this just by working together for a long time. Don't call Larry; he's not good at that. Call Steve; like he's amazing at that. Don't call Paula. So like we can kind of figure it out over time. But imagine if you could just leapfrog all of that
Yeah.
and get to that understanding super fast. That's what we like to do with teams and with leadership, and coming in, helping people understand not just the people around them either. It's also understanding themselves, and like, man, why does it I always get excited about these projects, and then 90 days into it, I'm burnout already. And, we're just getting started. Like, being able to understand why we think the way we think, do the way we do, make decisions the way that we make them. It's pretty awesome when you can kind of put those things together.
Well, I think the big problem a lot of times in organizations, I may have been doing this job for like 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
And, we get subject matter experts, we get critical person dependencies, right? And then the people think they can just take that subject matter expert and do a knowledge transfer to
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
anybody who's just IT without doing like your type of Nexus assessment.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go take this critical person dependency and they train the wrong guy. And that guy was there for like 30 years, and they knowledge transfer it to somebody. And then 6 months later, they retired the key person dependency. The knowledge transfer guy gets stressed out and he leaves.
Oh,
so
yeah.
then they have to go take the key person dependency and hire him as a consultant, bring him back.
Yeah, for 10x his old salary.
With more money, and then try to figure out, because they never did your Nexus assessment, to figure out, well, how do I do this knowledge transfer? Who's supposed to get it? And they seem to not know who that is.
Yeah.
And I've seen this for like 30 years. And they seem
It's
to not
amazing.
pick the right people.
It's amazing how common that is. And if you were to just, I don't know if you could even track this. I don't know how you would track it, but I guarantee you it costs us in the US billions of dollars. So if you talk about like all Western culture, it's billions of dollars a day of like lost productivity because you have the wrong people doing the wrong thing. Sometimes it's not way off. Sometimes it's just a little bit off, but imagine what it would look like if we could be on. And I think that, I think that we're coming into a time and place where it's going to be more important than it ever has before. We're going to be able to hand off a lot of the simple stuff to AI, and we're going to have to get a lot more clever. And I feel like it's going to be even more important than it ever has before to make certain that people are functioning in the way according to how they're really going to thrive. And I think that it's just like companies won't be able to get away with the inefficiencies that they used to in the, for the last 20 years. Like it just,
a lot of the problems we're having is like people fear the automation. I was involved for the last 25 years in a lot of automation.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, AI, but it's like we've moved from the mainframes to, the Oracle systems to the .NET systems to the blockchain and now the AI. It always progresses. And no matter what, you don't totally replace the critical thinking, right? The critical thinking and the type of business analysis that can go and figure out, regardless of what the code's going to be, what is the business case? What is the use case? What is the user story? AI usually can't figure that out. Like you have to have a person come in and actually talk to people and have that kind of social discipline of a social scientist, like a political scientist or sociology major
100%.
that knows how to create a questionnaire to ask the right question to get to the right answers.
Absolutely.
Right? And I don't think the AI will ever do that. I think you're always going to need some person to kind of guide, like a consultant that comes in and says, well, what is your business problem? Like, what is the core issue? And then how we solve it could be software agnostic. We'll figure out how we solve it, but we need to figure out what your core problem really is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, it's one of those things where whether AI can do that in 10 years or not, whether it's going to replace certain jobs or not, it kind of doesn't matter in some ways, because what we do know is that, people are always going to leverage those tools in a way that's not what they thought. And then they'll be able to use it in a positive way. It'll replace a whole bunch of jobs, but it creates new opportunities. But here's the thing. The room for like sloppiness and kind of having people plugged into roles that don't fit the way they're wired goes down. So we'll have less tolerance for people doing things that they're not really good at doing.
Yeah.
So I
People
think
should
that
actually get guided to where they can actualize, right? So I
totally.
think we see that with the Great Resignation. A lot of people said, I don't really fit here. I want
Mhm.
to go do my own thing, or I need
Yeah,
to go fit where I need. When they started making that assessment because of the pandemic, people just went and made the assessment themselves. Like, hey, this isn't working, so let me do something that is going to work. So,
yeah,
and not everybody is self-aware enough to do that, but at
yeah,
some point, there was a lot of people that did.
right, totally. Yeah, and I think that in some ways it's been horrible. Um, what happened during the pandemic was horrible, but in some ways it really pushed people to make changes they probably needed to make. And so for that, in that case, all of the horrible loss of income, loss of money, cost of trillions of dollars, death, all that stuff, that's like super horrible. But like one of the good outcomes from it was that a lot of people were pushed in a direction they should have already been going, but they didn't have they didn't have something to like kick them
kick
into
kick them
gear,
over.
kick them over. So like, yeah. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think that we're living in a time in history when the most opportunity that has ever existed exists now. So it's super exciting time, honestly.
Yeah, yes,
Regardless of
definitely.
the space, whether you're in tech, whether you're writing software, or whether you're I don't know, you're a baker at a bakery. Like
I
it's
think there's a lot
still
of capability in terms of like you can create like micro like entrepreneurial opportunities like where because of the AI, because of the automation, because of robotics, you could have something that took 100 people and maybe two people could do it because they got 3D printing, they got
exactly
automation, they got robots. So people will be able to create businesses that weren't possible because
totally,
of the automation. You could actually take somebody that was working in the cube,
yeah,
goes and creates their own business, has that
totally,
3D printing, has their AI automation, so that some of their actuarial stuff is being done automatically, so they don't need to
yeah,
do that.
so
So they
cool,
can do things and marketing. They don't have to hire somebody for that. They can actually do AI marketing. So there's all, regardless of what you're doing, whether you're a baker or a bicycle shop guy or
right,
somebody
right,
building some kind of whatever it is, a micro level entrepreneurs that you can do
yeah,
something that you didn't out of your garage, out of your
yeah,
home, like the
yeah,
original Apple and
yep,
Microsoft. You can be able to have that kind of entrepreneurship exploding. And
yeah,
that's where I think that's where the opportunity is, where I see it as a lot of, I
oh
think
yeah,
people are missing the boat when they think the machines are just taking over. You're going to have nothing. It's never been
right.
like that,
No,
you know?
no, no. I mean, it's definitely, it's definitely, you got to pay attention. It's definitely, there's some things to be cautious about. And, as a society, I think we're not being quite cautious enough. But at the end of the day, what we've seen for the last couple hundred years is we will figure it out. What's different is now is I think the need to understand like how we work so that we can function most optimally in this new world has never been greater. I like my wife and I have four different friends that all went to school to be school teachers, and all four of them quit after. Well, two of them quit after the first year, and the other two stuck around for a couple years, but they all quit within 5 years. Why? They hated it. Well, they literally went through and got their entire degree, everything. They were all focused. They all wanted to be school teachers. None of them are school teachers today because they're not really wired to be school teachers. They seemed like they wanted to do it for whatever reason. They thought they would be a good career path, and it wasn't. They literally, none of them are doing anything related at all to this massive expensive degree that they got. Why is that? Why is that? Like, we don't have the room, I believe, in our society anymore to allow that kind of waste. Like one
Yeah.
off here, one off there, that's fine. But like collectively, as a culture, as a society, Western culture, we don't have the room to like waste all of that time and effort and money to go down a path that we should have been able to see in advance. Like if we would create a profile for a third grade school teacher and have these guys take the NEXUS, I could have told all of them they would not like it. Like, you will not like this. You will not like managing these other people's children. Like, you're not wired to do that well. however, you find the other person that's like, I don't know about school teacher. I'm not sure I could handle all the college or whatever. No, look, you're wired to be an incredible third grade teacher. You're the one that needs to do it. These other ladies, they shouldn't do it. You should do it, kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
we don't have the room to make those mistakes like we used to. I don't think we ever did, but like we really don't anymore. And I'm just excited about kind of where we're going, like as a society, to where we're in a place where we can start to make better decisions. And that's really what we're trying to do with the Human Nexus and the Nexus profile and all the workshops and e-courses that we developed, is get people understanding themselves, unlock who they are, and get them in the right spot, and then they can thrive. That's really what it's about.
So, like, this is the question I like to ask, kind of toward the end of the session.
Yeah.
Is from a perspective of basic lessons learned. Are there like 3 major lessons learned that by doing the Nexus profile that you can kind of convey to the audience, like 3 major points? And I mean, I don't want to break it down to the shortest possible thing, but that's the common thing I do. Like, what are the top 3 lessons learned?
Yeah. So you mean for me personally, or as people need to think about as they're doing the?
Well, I mean, either you personally or you think the audience could actually take from the process, if you think it's a global thing,
Yeah. So I would say one of the lessons that I've learned is that basically, you go through, like in my experience, the last 25 years, I've been a serial entrepreneur. I've started a whole bunch of businesses. Most of them haven't worked out. Most of them have been difficult and sucked. But some of them have had moderate success. And there's just a lot of difficult things, a lot of difficult scenarios, bad decisions, mistakes that I've made. And if I look back at all of that, I'd say, one of the lessons that I've learned is every single one of those mistakes, if I allowed it, became a really important part of me developing the next thing that I needed to do. So one of the lessons that I've learned really is to make sure you're learning the lessons, and make sure that you're actually taking the things that are coming before you, whatever setbacks or whatever, and actually looking at them appropriately as part of like a life lesson plan that's kind of putting you on the trajectory to really make your to be the best version of who you are, to really accomplish like your purpose on the earth kind of thing, like, not to get too esoteric, but like the reason that you're here. Because if you let the mistakes that you've made hold you down, then you're not actually able to benefit from them as a lesson. As far as tying that into a lesson for everyone from the Nexus profile is, like, was it Chinese proverb, the very best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, but the second best time since you didn't do that is right now. And I think that's true with things like the Nexus, which is why I want to give the full advanced version away to everybody that's watching this podcast. Is the very best time to understand this deep level of how you're motivated was 20 years ago, but the second best time is right now. Like, so taking the opportunity to go in, do the Nexus takes like 15 minutes. Normally we sell this for $109, but anybody that uses that code GHOST will be able to get it for free. And that can equip you. That can kind of unlock a new language about how you function and how you work. And maybe prevent some people from going and getting a teaching degree for a third grade teacher when they're going to, hate it, or whatever. Right. So
get aligned to where
get aligned. So good. That's the right way.
Like in terms of music, we think about like harmony versus disharmony versus dissonance and noise.
Yes. Right? We're looking for harmony.
Yeah. You don't want dissonant sounds are not what you're going to want. You want that harmony. You want the melody. You want it to be memorable. You want it to be kind of just out there. There's like a lot of white noise, pink noise.
Yeah. Okay. We're looking for beautiful harmony with an incredible hook that just grabs people and they just humming the song the whole day. That's when you're in the right alignment. And that's what we're looking for.
You're in tune. Yeah. You're totally in tune, that you picked up on that frequency, which I like a lot of times. That's what you got to do. But thank you again for being on the show. We've got that
for sure.
profile for the advanced free checkout. And we're using the coupon code of Ghost. That will be clickable. We want to thank you for being a guest on the Family Like the Ghost podcast. It's always great to talk to new people every time we learn something new. And I appreciate that you've taken the time to be here today. So
Yeah, it's
thank
been
you
a
again.
pleasure. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.